Hello, I'm Nancy Michael. I'm the neuroscience contributor to these efforts. Yeah, and so far this morning we've kind of gone through the history of how we got here, a little deeper dive into the foundational research that set up the platform for kind of what ACEs are, why they're a thing. And in the last session, there was also some discussion about the positive childhood experiences, or these PCEs. So again, I'm so sorry that Frank's internet cut out, but I want to reiterate that a lot of this stuff is intuitive, right? But because it gets kind of mucked down in all their cultural yuck and all kinds of stuff that's just, what we inherit from the past or what we experience during our lives. I want to my hope for this next little session is to, that it is intuitive, right? And that it's okay, and that truly, when it comes to protective factors or positive childhood experiences, you are your kiddo's best shot. You are your kiddo's best shot, right? Like, we collectively become the next generation's best shot. So our children's greatest protector factors, right? Our community's greatest protective factors for the kiddos is us. All right. So just to get a better sense, I'd like to just see who is on the call, maybe a quick share of hands. Who is with us today? Do we have parents, caregivers, people that are involved with youth? So you can quick show of hand with your reactions in your chat, in your tools, maybe. Okay, got a thumbs up. A couple thumbs up. Great. All right. Okay. So, anybody get a handbook, a manual, an instruction set? Here's this unit. This is how you raise a child. Nope, I certainly did not get one. And I tell you what, there's been a lot of learning in my life. There is no steeper learning curve than being a parent, right? Like, all of a sudden, my husband and I went from being like lovely single, not single, but like single without children. And then in a moment, we were now the sole providers for supporting life. What? Oh, so crazy. All right. So no instruction set, right? So how many people felt totally overwhelmed? I know I totally felt completely overwhelmed. I had no idea what I was doing. I had read books. I had done, I did all my research. I'm a neuroscientist, right? I like to read about stuff. So I'd done all my reading, but then there was this kiddo, this little baby, and I was like, oh, I still have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing. All right. And then, right, luckily we made it through that first year. We had a second kid. Our children are now 13 and 10 years old. And sometimes it still feels totally overwhelming, because you know what those little suckers do? They change, right? Like, the second you've got it figured out, then something changes and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't work anymore. What's going on? And I always tell my oldest daughter that she has it the hardest because she's first. She is absolutely our experimental kid, and we got to like raise her up, right? But something changes, and so we learn from our mistakes that we make with her. We learn what works well with her, and so we can do better the next time. Yes, I see a hand raised. Oh, maybe that's just, yes, something changes. Got it. Okay. Okay, and then something changes. Anybody got it all figured out? Because if you do, then you should be giving this talk, and I'll just take a step back. All right. So we got a wide variety of folks on the call. All right, and so what do you see? Right. So I have a very particular education and background. This tends to be a little bit more universal. How many people have planted a seed before? Right? What do you see in this image? You can put it in the chat. Anybody? Oh, change. Okay. I like it. Growth. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So maturation. Nice. These are all very, like, I was thinking a seed, and a seed that sprouts and grows. Okay. But all of those things are absolutely true, right? And so a seed that sprouts and grows. And so it turns out that human brains are very, very much like this over the first many years of development. right? That we start with little seedling neurons, and one of the major brain cells in is called a neuron. And neurons, much like seeds, they start really tiny. They start with these little itty bitty, they're like little seedlings. And then over time, given the appropriate environments, nice rich soil, some sunshine, enough water, right? These little seedlings also begin to branch. These little seedling neurons, we have a lot of junior neurons that that populate the brain. That they, over the first many years of life, right? So if you look at these three panels, the same number of neurons are in each panel, but you notice this amazing growth over the first many years of life, right? And so we'll come back to this, but this is one of those foundational things, foundational ideas that I really hope everybody kind of captures in terms of this whole conversation. Why are ACEs a thing? Why are protective factors a thing? Is because the once we have a recognizably shaped brain, it really is these experiences that we have in exchange with our environment that direct which branches grow, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to, which branches grow, how deep the roots go, how far do they spread, how tall does the tree grow, okay? All right, so here is another fun question. What can babies do? What can a baby do? Enter your thoughts into the chat. There you go. They can cry. Absolutely. They're really good at it. Anything? Eat and sleep. Yep. Great. Poop, crawl. So yeah. So eventually they can crawl, but right when we're first born, we can't even do that. Depending on the kiddo, that's anywhere from like 6 to 10 months or whatever. Absolutely. They observe. They're taking in information all of the time. Absolutely. What can a toddler do? Right? Maybe crawl. What else? Walk. Yep. Play, eat, talk. Yeah, right. So there's this massive expansion of skill over the first, year or two of life. What about a kiddo? A full-on child. They can talk. Yep. They can gesture. You bet. They can run. Yep. Oh, they argue. Man, do they argue. Indeed, they do. They call you out on your nonsense. Absolutely. They fight, they feel, yep, more complex thinking. So yeah, awesome. All these problem solving kinds of things. So again, this massive expansion of skill and behavior, it's what we call arborization, just like a tree arborizes with its branches. The same thing is happening in the neurons of the brain. Our neurons in our cortex, that outside wrinkly part of the brain, are arborizing, they're growing. And again, this arborization and this increased complexity is reflected, or we can see evidence of it in this incredible acquisition of skill that happens over the first many years of life. Okay. So we established, so when we think about a baby, when we think about an infant, we've established they can cry, right? They can eat and sleep and poop. Toddlers can do a little bit more. Can any of these guys, I'm making this, but can they take care of them? So can a baby get its own food? Can a baby change its own diaper? Can a baby say, so some of the words in the chat were, they start to feel, well, infants might not be able to articulate a sense of love or anything directly, right? Oh, I feel safe with you. But they absolutely feel it, right? So we have more junior neurons, more seedling neurons in this wrinkly outside part. But the parts of our brain that are responsible for breathing, heart rate, temperature regulation, those are much more arborized and really, really well connected at the time of birth because they're necessary for survival. Okay? All right. So a baby can't do a whole lot, right? So tell me what you see here. So this is a really powerful visual, a really powerful triangle. Anybody recognize this? Maslow, absolutely, right? And so what Maslow really suggests is that physiological needs first, food, water, warmth, rest. Absolutely. Those physiological needs are absolutely critical for survival, right? And that allows us then to meet our safety needs. The safety needs comes next. We'll jeopardize our safety to risk getting food if we're hungry enough. But one of the downsides of Maslow, and then emerging from that, right? We need to have these basic needs met before we can get to these other things. But one of the downsides of Maslow is that it looks at development, it looks at human capability from an adult perspective, right? From a me grown up looking at you grown up, it says here are the things that are necessary. It implies a linear progression that we need physiological needs first, and then we can meet our safety needs, and then from that, our psychological needs emerge. And then only then can we have this self-fulfillment and self-actualization. So a linear progression, and that this view is of an independent and isolated agent, right? That this human system is in isolation and independence from the rest of the world around it. So let's put, how well does this work out in a developmental setting, right? We've established babies can't do any of this on their own. They can't get their food. They can't get their water. They can't change themselves. They can't even put themselves to bed a lot of time, right? They can't quiet their nervous systems enough to be able to allow for sleep circuits to kick in and bring on rest, right? So this perspective does not work at all if we're putting this in the context of human development. And everybody on the call, nobody was born yesterday, no matter what my husband might say. Ha 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 ha. No, I'm kidding. Right? Everybody on the call, right? Was an infant at one time, successfully developed throughout childhood and adolescence, right? And you're still around to tell the tale. So from a human development, if we think about this framework in the context of this fourth dimension of time and development, we really need to understand that human beings, in the absence of care, right? This demystification of why ACEs are a thing and why PCEs matter, right? ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, PCEs, positive childhood experiences. Why they matter is because at the root of human requirement is actually this intimacy of relationship. It is the only thing that allows us to survive beyond infancy. It is the only thing that allows us to survive through childhood, is the care and protection from other humans. Now, adolescence becomes a different conversation for another time. I think there might be a little bit later on, so that's a little seed for our presentation later on this evening, right? Adolescence is a different beast, but it's not like kiddos turn 13 and they don't need anything anymore, right? So that this independence that's modeled in Maslow is really actually a great distance from the human expectation across a lifespan. We are dependent when we are younger, but we grow from being dependent to interdependent as we grow, okay? So I really want, this is then the framework. So we're going to be talking about, why are you the greatest protective factor for your kiddo, right? So in part of this then, this dependency and interdependency that the brain actually has, it maintains these expectations of belonging and love throughout a lifetime, right? The brain absolutely has expectations of care and consistent care. The brain absolutely has expectations of lots of other things that are beyond the scope of this conversation that we have. So let's think about, we're going to keep it focused though on the ACEs and PACEs relationship. For anybody that was on the call earlier, this image might look familiar, right? The brain has expectations. The brain is a situated organ. It's situated inside of the skull, yes. But from the moment, well, even from before the time that we're born, from the moment we are born, we are always situated in this broader context outside of ourselves. We can never, throughout childhood, we will never, ever, 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 ever be able to maintain our life and our livelihood in the absence of care. So remember that seedling, plant a seed and it sprouts and it sprouts and it grows and it grows and it eventually gets really big. The same thing is happening with all of these neurons, right? So this is a picture of a human brain. All of these neurons are growing and branching through these exchanges with the environment. And our primary caregivers become the conduit through which we understand the world, right? These primary caregiving relationships become the environmental forces that direct which branches grow, how they grow, how deep our roots grow. And so these early exchanges within our environment are primary influencers and moderators that sculpt that foundational brain architecture. And it's from that foundational brain architecture that through which we're obligated to see and understand the world around us until we learn something new. Ooh, somebody's iPhone wrote across the screen. Okay. All right. So kind of from this then, brain expectations. Can I ask you a quick question? If your iPhone accidentally drew a yellow line across the screen on the art pad or something like that, perhaps if you could go back and edit that. I can't seem to be able to do that. If not, we'll just keep going. So part of brain expectations. So this idea of protective factors, that came up earlier in these positive childhood experiences. The idea is alluded to in this idea that infants are born completely dependent upon the world around them, right? So that nervous systems, no matter how old we get, require protection from the people around them, right? Protective factors is a fancy way of saying protective factors are part of a person's environment, right? So this can be built, this can be relationship, part of a person's environment that buffer against stress, right? Right now I have a sweater on. This is a protective factor for me because I get cold really easily, right? And in the ability then through exercising exchanges with our environment, we see the modeling of behavior, we experience the impact of that protection. And that exchange, that reciprocity, directs the development of which branches are growing. How deep are our roots, or where are those roots growing out to, and where are they tapping into resources at far off places, okay? And through this diversity of architecture, of branching and root systems, we are able to develop resilience through the diversity of experiences, okay? And because of that foundational importance, I don't survive in the absence of care, right? Relationships from a human brain function and a brain health perspective, relationships with others are particularly important and particularly positioned to from a bottom up way of inducing protective factors for children. Everything about an infant and child's nervous system is obligated to look for care from bigger nervous systems. They don't get a choice, okay? So the ways in which the world responds to us when our nervous systems are little are critically important for the ways in which we understand the world as we age, okay? Which becomes our responsibility as bigger nervous systems to set an example, right? Back to Laura Porter's slide in one of the first sessions, right? We have to be intentional about creating the world we want for our children. If we follow paths of least resistance, things will stay exactly the same and likely get worse. Every single person needs a village of support. Every single person. It's critically important for young kiddos and critically important for adults. It looks different, right? But the interdependence does not age out of us just because we've turned 21 or 35. All right. So the term protective factor might be new, but we all have that. I want everybody on the call to think about a time that they've been protected by another. Pop it in the chat. That is an example of protective factors in action. What do we got?
Repeat your question.
If people can put, if they had an example of a time when you felt protected by another, right? My mom came to get me when there you go, during thunderstorms, getting hugs from my grandma. You bet. Absolutely. Super powerful protective factor. Anytime my mom or dad could come and pick me up from school when I wasn't feeling good, right? So even if we don't want to put them in the chat, I want you to maybe just write a note to yourself. Those are so important. Roommate giving me a pep talk. Yep, absolutely. Right? That those relationships become critically important for giving us strength in the moments where we are alone, when we have to weather experiences on our own. So some examples of protective factors, right? Here's a wide variety: nurturing and attachment, access to concrete community support, social and emotional competence of children, which is only developed with good modeling by bigger nervous systems, knowing what is developmentally appropriate, right? We can't expect a 2-year-old to act like a 35-year-old. Supportive social connections, parental resilience, right? So some protective factors include these things. And so the question is, how do people form protective factors? So we'll spend some time in this session. How do we become that for other people? Right? So this outline, the structure of this talk comes from one of our resources. It's available on our webpage. I'll have links to it at the end of the chat. Maybe they'll be able to get popped into the chat in this session. But it's a brain health for primary caregivers. And so one of these kind of critical brain expectations is this serve and return relationship. So what do you see when you look at these pictures, right? Look at that joy and light in her eyes, right? This reciprocity. What do you see? I see love. I see safety, right? From a nervous system perspective, I see a nervous system whose heart rate is regulated, who's playful and relaxed. What do we got? Yeah, eye to eye connection, a sense of comfort and security. Absolutely. And so again, remember that our brain is a situated organ and we are our whole selves all of the time. And so these early interactions really do become kind of critical and foundational in, again, developing which branches are showing up. What parts of our brain are getting strongly connected to other parts of our brain? Are they the parts for this little one here? Are they the parts of our brain that are able then to implicitly look to another with trust and love, right? Because depending on, right, from an adverse childhood experience perspective, we know also kind of what it can feel like if we look outward and our look or our ask, our serve, is met with indifference or sometimes even anger, okay? So giant brain expectation is this serve and return relationship. When I serve something up, right, if I babble, if I look to you, if I ask a question, then it is returned in some way by the nervous system I'm looking to in that moment to reaffirm my serve. So this is the kind of behavior, this is the style of interaction that is going to be built in my nervous system through these serve and return reactions. Okay? Serve and return then lends directly into this idea of attachment, right? So when we serve something, right, if that's met with love and consistency and compassion, right, then we have the ability within our neural architecture to develop the circuits and cell connections that are necessary to have what the literature talks about as a secure attachment, right? Our brain is expectant of consistent caregiving, and consistent caregiving that also is like warm and affiliative. We established that in the absence of that care, infants will die. We do not survive. And so the consistency and kind of what we talk about is emotional valence. Okay, what it means, right, is our serve met with love and compassion? Is our serve met with anger or indifference, right? That we can receive care, we can have all of our basic needs met, but the valence, the feeling around how those needs are met also becomes a really big moderator in how those branches are growing, how deep those root systems go, and how our brain ends up being connected within itself. Okay? So our style of attachment is built through the style, consistency, inconsistency of these serve and return reactions. Okay. So it's not only about how our primary caregivers engage with us, but it's also about how our primary caregivers are engaging around us. That builds our brain architectures in ways that let our brain know, right? Not from this grown-up perspective of like, that's very nice or that's not very nice, right? But the little brain is trying to figure out, how do I survive in this world? What are the behaviors that get the attention in this world, right? Because in the absence of attention, I die, right? Okay. So I need to figure out how to get attention. I need to figure out how to like call all those bigger nervous systems to my side so I can get, right, through caregiving, I can get the stuff that I need. Okay. So what do you see? Oh. Right. This reminds me very much of what someone put in the chat, right? My grandmother comforting me when there were big storms, right? Tonight we get scared sometimes. We pop out of bed. We go look for somebody. Who's there? Yes, absolutely. Safety. Who's there? Because this little nervous system, you know what it's like to feel stressed, right? This little nervous system doesn't have the architecture that it needs to bring itself back down. This little nervous system looks outside of itself. Where can I get, like, I need to find safety here. And it's the way I'm received that allows, right? My tiny body would mirror the bigger bodies around me. So for my brain to develop the architecture that it needs to be able to settle back down, right? Kind of, we'll come back to this idea of resilience. To be able to settle back down, I need a model of what that looks like, right? What about here? I love this one. Right? I need a model of what not only like safety looks like, but I need a model of compassion and play and love and joy. How our primary caregivers engage with us and engage around us build our brain's architecture, right? Not a whole lot of safety, right? And this one I included very intentionally because in 2023, we don't have to feel like we are in physical danger to have our needs not being met. Indifference to a tiny nervous system, to a child nervous system, even to an adolescent nervous system or a grown nervous system, indifference is not innocuous, right? Type, timing, and duration that Frank talked about earlier, all of those things matter, right? So I am not saying that indifference is the same as getting punched in the face every day. Nope. I'm just saying that in 2023, with all the distractions that we have, right, we have to be intentional and aware of how we are spending our time when there are so many younger nervous systems around us that are looking to us as the model of how to engage and behave, right? So serve and return, quality, consistency of those interactions are what then inform the type of attachment that we have, right? So the idea, if we want our kiddos to feel secure and safe, if we want their brains to be able to develop the architecture that they need to experience a challenge, seek out help, ask for help, reinstate a sense of calm, it's our responsibility to be fully present. When we have time with our family, we need to limit distractions. Right? If people around us are upset, if our kiddos are upset, how do we create a sense of calm in our own physiology so that we can model calm for our kiddos? Go into the chat. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Cuddles and cugs. Okay. So then serve and return kind of builds this attachment style. The idea would be then that resilience emerges from the combination of experience. There was in the previous session, the different types of stress that were articulated. Sometimes people use positive, tolerable, or toxic. I prefer acute tolerable or toxic, because from a body perspective, from a physiology, anytime we're stressed, whether it's for an exam, going home to a dangerous house, walking by a peer's house that gives us a hard time all the time, falling and scraping our knee, whatever. All right. So anytime we experience a stress, no matter how we might culturally value that stress, the system mounts a stress response. So no matter what, we are all going to experience stress throughout the course of our lives. It is really, really, really important to be able to develop the circuitry in our brains and our bodies that allow us to experience a stress and recover from that stress, right? That's why we only learn that through modeling of relationship. We only learn that, we can only take advantage of that through interdependent reciprocal relationship. So resilience is not the absence of hardship, nor is it beating up on people and they're resilient, it'll be fine. Resilience is actually the diversity of brain architecture and physiology that allows us to experience a stress and have the diversity of experiences that allows us to understand what the stressor is, know the tools and have the skills that we need to reinstate a sense of physiological calm on the inside. Okay? And this has to do with the complexity of our brain, of the architecture, that branching and those root structures. Resilience really is the brain and body's ability to recover from a challenge. So obviously, when we think about, right, the previous conversation talked about stress dose, right? If the dose is coming at us all the time, there's not an opportunity really for that system to have a space that's far enough away to be able to learn how to recover if there's all this chronic pressure that's pushing it out of whack. Compared to, there can be a whole lot of yuck, but man, if this little body has a grown person, a bigger nervous system that it can look to, that even though that stuff is still out there, this relationship allows me to know what it feels like to be okay on the inside, even when the rest of that stuff is still out there and still so yucky. So it's these models, right? Back to that kind of reorganization. Models are not words. Models are people in our lives that have the ability to offer calm and offer the skill building necessary to be able for our brains to develop the architecture, the branching and roots that they need, so that if I experience a challenge later on, I'm able to reinstate, or I can ask for the help that I need. So in the absence of challenge, we never learn how to manage challenge. In the absence of support, we never learn how to recover. We need both and. And I'm not saying that it's okay to beat up on kids, because it's not, right? I just want to be clear, right? What challenges, all right. And resilience also is not an excuse to beat up or dump on kids or grown folks. Okay. Resilience emerges as the sum of experiences, right? There will inevitably always be hardship, but it's the positive stuff, right? These positive childhood experiences, the weight of all those protective factors in the sum have to be able to outweigh. So the type, timing, and duration of all that positive stuff actually has to weigh more in the long run than either the innocuous or the negative, right? So that, I mean, if you put it like that, that's a really different ask and a really different requirement of all of our behaviors compared to there are these 10 aces and the justice system has to figure out how to do whatever, right? How do we as a collective tip the scales? Think about our own behaviors. Think about the way that we're showing up for ourselves, the way that we're showing up for other people, so that collectively we can tip the scales from innocuous or hardship to something a little bit more interrelated and reciprocal. Whew. Okay, how we doing? Yeah. Okay. So this is another one of those points that like ends up being a little bit of a disconnect, right? We can talk about we want our kids to be resilient. Of course we do. But we don't often culturally, right? The conversations around these things tend to exist at a bit of a different distance from kind of how they're constructed and what it requires of our behavior. Executive function is another one of those things that I think we want our kids. Why do we need executive function? What is it, right? It's all that school stuff. We want our kids to do well in school so that they can get a good job and be responsible grown-ups or whatever. So executive function, much like resilience, is one of those things that emerges from, right? Well, our brain always has the capacity for it and it will develop on some level, but the strength of it emerges from all of these other kind of prerequisite things. So executive function is the decision-making skills, the ability to exercise self-control, responding to unexpected challenges, and being able to reestablish, right, that sense of calm, right? These are all aspects of executive function. And so how many people have to use executive function at least one time during their day? Yeah, most of us, right? And most of us have to use it multiple times over the course of their day. Many, many, many times throughout the course of the day. Okay. So here's my question for you guys, and we can take a minute or two or three. Why then are serve and return, secure attachment, secure attachment and resilience, why do they become prerequisites for our best shot at strong executive function? And this is a really hard question. So I'll read again. Why are all these things that we've talked about so far, serve and return, secure attachment, and resilience, why are they necessary prerequisites for building strong executive function? And here's my hint. If you're struggling, like, what is she asking me? It's still in the morning time, and you might even be in a different time zone. I'm in Eastern time zone. What is she asking me? So tell me, what does it feel like to be overwhelmed? What does it feel like to be lonely? What does it feel like to feel unloved or unworthy? And then try and solve a problem. Do your math homework. Okay? Why is it that these things are so important prerequisites? There you go. Awesome. They're needed to learn and organize ourselves. You bet. You bet that the ability to solve the problem means that everything about our internal state is experiencing that sense of calm, right? Has already constructed the ability to maintain and organize a sense of calm. Everything about the previous experiences have built the architecture that I need to be able to understand that these things are going on, right? But I can solve that problem and I can allow myself an opportunity to use some different brain resources. What else we got? Feeling in all these negative ways lights up threats and colors how we see everything else. Absolutely. If we're preoccupied by worry, right? Because that, right? So that's a survival strategy. Survival is the brain, always the brain's number one priority. And so if we are taken up, if all of our brain machinery is taken up by these preoccupied with these kind of threat things, these stressors, our brain doesn't have the ability to work in this executive function space. These are interconnected systems where survival will always take priority. Yep, you can only access executive function from a place of safety. They help with emotional regulation, which can enhance our other cognitive functionings. Yep, absolutely. They allow us to feel secure, level-headed, so we can think straight and clearly. Absolutely. So again, and what I really want to iterate is that all of these ways in which we talk about behavior emerges from our brain architecture. If we don't have the architecture in place in our brain to do the behavior, to do the thing that we're being asked to do, we're not going to be able to do it. Plain and simple. Okay. So prerequisites. So, right. So over here on the right-hand side in a stressed brain, right? So this is another one of those things that much like the graph that was put up earlier about all the brain stuff, we're going to try to unpack it a little bit here. All of this sensory stuff will create alarm bells in the brain, which activates our body's threat detection system or our stress response system. And when the stress response system is armed and ready to go, it's actively inhibiting, right? I'm going to say that again. When our stress response system is armed and ready to go, it is actively inhibiting, shutting down the brain's problem-solving, introspective, self-aware, relationship modeling kind of parts of the brain. All of that frontal cortex stuff is actively inhibited in these states of high stress. Now, why would that be? Well, it turns out thinking is not only joyful, but thinking is hard. It takes a tremendous amount of brain energy to do the thinking. It also involves lots and 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 lots of different trees and branches and seeds, right? So all of those different neurons that are involved, and that takes time, a lot of time. How many people have ever sat with a problem? It's just a problem to sit with, right? But it's like a thinking problem. Or anybody had the opportunity to create a piece of art from scratch, right? It takes time to do that kind of thinking, right? So in an evolutionary perspective, right, or in a rapid response in a threat world, that time is costly. So I'm going to shut it down so I can focus on protecting myself, right? So part of executive function needs to allow for, from a developmental perspective, serve and return, people like responding to us, returning our serves with love and compassion and showing us the world, explaining the world around us, develops a secure sense of attachment. Then I have a good model of how to reinstate calm. And through that diversity of brain architecture, I now can do a lot of these things on my own. So I have the ability to help settle myself. I have the architecture within my brain to help settle myself. So I have the ability to think. I have the ability to focus. I have the ability to hold things, hold different pieces in my brain at the same time to do more complicated and complex problem solving. And ultimately, we are how we repeatedly spend our time. When we're talking about healthy habits, then over a lifetime, the scary thing is that our kiddos look to us. Yikes. Yikes. Our kiddos look to us. We are how we repeatedly spend our time. So first, we have to look at what are we practicing, right? Because we set the most powerful example for what our children will practice. And I'm not talking about soccer, right? Maybe math, I don't know. But I'm talking about intention. And I'm talking about attention. I'm talking about civic engagement. I'm talking about forgiveness. And I'm talking about kindness. And I'm talking about listening. And I'm talking about setting aside my giant piles of work so that we can make cookies or whatever it is. What are we practicing? Because that becomes the model for what our children practice. And through this reciprocal relationship and this modeling, that is how our children's brain, that's how the next generation's brain architecture, right, is being sculpted and molded. Okay? So that healthy habits, executive function, emotional regulation, whatever it is, that our behaviors that we express over time becomes this sum of experience, right? So for us to be able, if we think about what we want grown-ups to be, if we think about health of communities, and if we think of well-being and all of these things that so often we say that we want, right? One of the missions for this work is how do we celebrate our collective strengths through the neuroscience of human resilience, right? We understand human resilience emerges. How do we all participate to move the collective human experience away from hardship and indifference to one of relationship and interdependence? We all need to be participating in sculpting or creating, right? And that's the amazing thing about the brain is that it never loses its plastic ability. It never loses its chance to change. It's way easier if we just treated kids well, right? Like, wow, why can't we just be nice to kids? Why can't we actually just take care of kids? But luckily, our brains always maintain this plastic ability throughout the course of our lifetimes, right? So when we think about protective factors, we can all do better than what we do, right? Most of us can. There might be some people on the call who's got it all figured out. Again, that's why we should switch, because I know I can definitely do better so much of the time than what I do. How do people become protective factors? First and foremost, we have to look to our experience. And here's the beautiful part about intention. We can't, and executive function. We can intentionally look to our experience, and we can mourn for that kiddo that so many of us were that didn't get the protective factors that they needed. And we can make an intentional choice to say, my kiddos, our kiddos, they deserve better. And then we have to do the work, right? We have to be the courageous ones to say, you know what? I need some help right now. I can't do this on my own. You know what? I'm feeling really upset right now. I don't want to yell at you. I have to take a moment. I have to take a step away so that I don't lash out because I can't think clearly. Okay? We all have an opportunity to become the best protective factor that we can. So here's our brainstorm. And this does not have to be in the chat. But my question to you is, what are you doing already? Every single person is already doing something that offers the potential or capacity to be a protective factor, either for yourself or for other people. What is it? What are you doing already? Maybe you're really good at going for a walk to clear your head. Maybe you're really good at offering a hug when you see someone close to you that just looks like they need a little bit of pick me up. How can you build on that, right? And I believe it was Valshana earlier, right? That she's a helper, she's a doer. And that is necessary. We have to be able to help others, but we also within that have to be able to care for ourselves. So in helping others, we also have to build on our strength of helping by maybe starting to ask for the help that we need, right? The hug that we need, the love, the note. Can you pick up my kids? Can you pick up my kids? Who are your protective factors? Right? Some of us are blessed to have many. Others might not only have more than a few. Maybe not even one, right? One of the most powerful components of the self-healing community's research in general, so that adults that have one or two people that they can rely on for practical help. Can you pick up my kids? Can I borrow some money, or can I have some money to help pay my electric bill? One or two people that you can rely on for practical help are something like 87%, so Karina, you can jump in here, 87% less likely to suffer from significant mental illness, 46% less likely to go hungry. Having one or two trusted adults that we can rely on for practical help makes it, right, when we talk about that net analogy, man, it can just like tighten up that weave. But the majority of us need it. The majority of us need to have those rich relationships, and those of us that do, we better be counting our blessings every day and offering what we have to others. And then the hard part about it, again, this is a very long journey, right? When we have children, we make a commitment for a lifetime, whether we know it or not at the time that we have them, right? We are grateful to our parents and caregivers and our community that raised us because they made a commitment for a lifetime. How can we stay intentional? Which relates back to protective factors, right? When we are not able to lean on our own protective factors, it's really easy to get tired, right? And from what we understand too of stress circuitry, when we get tired, we start to get stressed, and then we start to inhibit all of that rich brain function and activity and capacity that helps us solve problems and helps us raise each other up. So how can you stay intentional? So these are your 4 questions to take with you. Look at them every day. What are you doing already? Celebrate that. How can you build on the strengths that you have? How can you share your strengths with other people so you can build together? Those would be your protective factors. Those are the people that it's safe to have those conversations with, that want to support you, that you want to support. And you can start to reach out over time, and you commit to be staying intentional, because this is too important not to. And we all have responsibility. The most common way that people, this is one of my favorite quotes ever. The most common way people give up their power is thinking that they don't have any. So much of life trains us to thinking that there is nothing we can do, right? Frank was talking about earlier, right? That these epidemiological data sets emerge from these 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people data sets. I can't do anything about that, but I can do something for you, and you can do something for me, and we can do things for each other, because your power is there to help build strong brains for yourself, for your kiddos, for the community around you. You're welcome. I know it got popped in the chat a couple of times. The outline of this talk was drawn from this book resource right here, and one of the writers of this resource and one of the creators of this resource, or the like inspirations for the resource, were on the call earlier. They might still be around. So this one is really designed for primary caregivers, right? Whether you're a parent, grandparent, auntie, family of choice, church family, maybe you run a daycare, I don't know, right? In working classrooms, primary caregivers. This is a complementary resource. This is a children's book written at an emerging reading level, second grade-ish, maybe, right? That tells the story of some siblings kind of throughout the course of their day. And then there are additional resources for what we call the reading hero. Because again, every one of us has an opportunity to engage, to support. We just haven't thought of it yet, or maybe we have, and we can build on where we started. So I want to thank everybody so much for taking the time to spend Saturday. Oh my goodness, it's Saturday. And there's a couple minutes for questions or anything, and we'll happily take. Yeah, thank you guys for spending time with us today.
Any questions, you can unmute or put it in the chat.
All right, maybe now it's a good time to remind, this is a fundraiser. Should you go ahead and do it? If you liked anything that you heard, please go ahead and check out the Give Grove website, share it with everybody. This is what we're trying to do, man. We're just trying to remind everybody that how they show up and what they do matters so much to all the communities. So thank you guys so much for spending time with us on a Saturday.
Thank you. Jane, you have an update for us?
Yes, I do. So we are currently at 4,922.67 cents of giving. Yay. So thank you so much for your support, and please check out the Give Grove link. Anything means so much to us and this movement.
Yes. And don't forget, check out those silent auction. They are great Christmas gifts. This is the time of year that you want to find cool gifts. So we're gonna pause our record. All right, welcome back. Thank you for joining. We have Karina and Jane to dive into the neuroscience of resilience. Our work is all about building community capacity, building resilient communities. And so having the ability to dive deeply into the neuroscience, that is just not a word. I heard two celebrities talking about how they're so tired of hearing the word resilience, and they're so tired of hearing the word self-care. And I was like, this is because you don't understand it. You don't understand that it's not just words. It actually has true science behind it, real definition. And so this is why I love being connected to this work, so that we can share some truths about what these words mean. So you're in wonderful, capable hands of Jane and Karina. Please introduce yourself. And Jane, please include the part that I would normally include.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys who have been here for staying with us through this journey. And also welcome to all the new faces or names. I guess we're the only faces showing right now, but all the new names that have joined. I am Karina. I work as the Self-Healing Communities Coordinator. I just graduated in May from the University of Notre Dame. I studied neuroscience and theology, and I have been working with self-healing communities since my sophomore year, so almost 3 years now. And I'm also just excited to do this presentation in particular because it's so foundational to our work, and so excited to be doing this.
And hi, everyone. My name is Jane. I am a Near-P Science intern. I started working at self-healing communities, I want to say last December-ish. And I graduated in May with a major in neuroscience from the University of Notre Dame, so I'm a recent grad too, and I am currently working here in South Bend, and I am also on the Notre Dame fencing team, I guess no longer because I graduated, but I am training on the Canadian national team with hopes of qualifying for the Olympics. So I have kind of self-healing communities and fencing going on right now. And I am so excited to give this presentation. As Karina said, this is so foundational to everything that we do, and this work has very much been so impactful in my life. So I am very excited to share it with everyone.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Awesome. So I'm going to reread our mission statement. And so the mission of self-healing communities is to nurture community and individual well-being through the understanding of the neuroscience of human resilience and the celebration of our collective strengths. And so in the mission itself, it says the neuroscience of human resilience. So this has to be kind of important to our work, to what we're doing, but we might ask the question, like, what does that mean? What is human resilience? Because like Valshana said, resilience is a term that can get just tossed around all the time, but we might not know what we're actually talking about or what the neurobiological basis is of resilience. Jane.
Fell asleep there for a second. So before we could talk about resilience, we need to talk about the science of stress and the neurobiology of what's going on in your body when you're stressed, because really resilience only arises in stress.
Mm-hmm. So resilience and stress go hand in hand.
So I know all of you have experienced stress before. It is very much a human experience, and we are stressed all the time in our everyday life. But at least when I'm stressed out, I'm often not thinking about everything that's going on inside of my body. It is not just in your head when you are stressed out. There are so many physiological changes that are going on. So when your stress system is set off, this could be everything from sitting in traffic or being stressed out about an exam that's coming up, all the way to, your parents were divorced, or you're unsure where your next meal is going to come from. All of these activate your stress response. And there are two different facets that come along with this activation. So nervous system and endocrine system. It is quite complicated, so I won't get into the nitty-gritties of all of it, I promise. But really, both of these two systems work to make huge physiological changes within your body to help you survive this stressor. So, for example, some of these changes that you probably will recognize is your heart might start beating, you might feel sweaty, your blood pressure rises, your liver releases energy so that you're ready to go. So there are actually different levels of stress that we can experience: acute, tolerable, and toxic. But actually, in all three of these levels of stress, the same stress response is getting activated. I think in today's age, stress is almost glorified. It almost seems like a good thing to be stressed out and to be working all the time and to have a million things on the go because you're being productive, you're getting things done. But your body actually doesn't know what good stress is. That does not exist. When your body isn't able to tell why you are stressed out. So it is the same stress response, this nervous and endocrine system that is activated if you are, stressed about an exam. all the way to if you're experiencing abuse. So it's the same baseline. In these three levels, acute, tolerable, and toxic, what really differentiates them is the length of activation. So in acute, this is a brief activation and your body is able to bounce back and return to baseline once the stressor goes away. When we move to tolerable and toxic, tolerable, this activation occurs for longer. It might be a more serious stressor. In this example, we're talking about a divorce. But what really makes a difference is having those supportive relationships that can really pull you back and help you temper the stress response and protect you from it. Where we get into some danger and a spot where there can be really serious effects on your brain and body is toxic stress. And this is when that same stress response is activated for a long time, but you have no supportive relations to buffer this stress and help you get through it. And in toxic stress, this is where, again, you can start to see those real changes on your brain and body, and it can really impact your well-being. But all of this being said, stress is not bad. We need stress in our lives. If we were not stressed out, literally nothing would get done ever. So it is a balance. We do want stress to be motivated, but we do have to bring an understanding of the effects that stress can have on our body, and then understanding when that balance is getting tipped too much and we're not having those supports to help us navigate this.
Yeah, and I just want to say to that, like, to go back to this slide, I usually forget the fact that these systems are being activated when I'm stressed out. I know I've talked to Velshana before and being like, she's like, girl, you have a lot going on. I'm like, but it's all good things. Like, there's such good things. And she's like, but the body doesn't know the difference between it being good a lot or bad a lot. It's just a lot. And that perspective changes it, because then thinking about these different systems and their activation, it's like, okay, yeah, if my nervous system is reacting when I'm stressed out and increasing my heart rate and increasing my blood pressure, that over a long period of time, that's going to do damaging effects to my body in the long run. And so that's why it's really important to now look at the dosages, and it's like, okay, yeah, stress isn't a bad thing, but it becomes toxic or harmful when it's chronically activated. So yeah, so Jane said stress is a part of being human. We need it. And so I'm going to need everyone to just take a nice deep breath in and out. Okay, we're going to enter into some personal reflection time. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to go to the next slide, and please feel free to enter into the chat which one you relate to, 1, 2, or 3. So take a moment, check out the meme, and see which one you relate to the most. Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you everyone who responded in the chat. We played this little small tangent, but we played this with the interns this week. And it was just, it got so many laughs with us, and we were talking about the different images, and it was a nice way to acknowledge the fact that we're all stressed about something. During my undergrad years, I definitely was in the number 2 realm of like, everything's on fire, but like, this is fine. I'm fine. We're fine. We're getting through it. And this is it. Right now, I feel like I'm in that 3 image, because I'm like, okay, I'll get my lavender essential oils to like help me out. But we're all dealing with stress, and in our society, we don't really honor it enough, or we just power through and we just go, and we don't realize how much stress is affecting us. So thank you again for participating. And so we've made the case that stress is important. Stress is what we're facing. But we really need resilience to face stress effectively. And I've bolded the term effectively because we could face stress in very ineffective ways. Like, I know for me, like, I can just power through my stress and not get my sleep and just neglect, like, my body's speaking to me. It's like, okay, I'm not listening to you. And so I'm handling my stress, but that's not the most effective way to build a really strong brain and take care of my nervous system. And so what is resilience? Oh, yeah. What is human resilience?
Okay, so resilience. Resilience is the ability to experience stressors and to reinstate healthy brain and body functioning. Okay, so that's kind of a sciencey definition. What does that mean exactly? So as I was stating before, our body kind of works in this range of normal brain and body functioning on a day-to-day when we're not stressed out. And when we face a stressor, we're bounced out of that normal range because, I mean, our stress response is turned on. Resilience is the ability to get back into that healthy range of homeostasis and healthy brain and body functioning.
Awesome. Yeah. And so it's really the ability not to get stuck, not to stay outside of that healthy range, but to get back in and bounce forward even better after stress and adversity.
So this is kind of a tangent, but not really. So this is a page from our Brain Care for Kids books, which are going to be released soon in collaboration with the ACEs Indiana Coalition. And this is how we described resilience in the book, but we thought it would be helpful for all of you. It's helpful for me at least. So if we take the analogy of a trampoline, when you're experiencing a stressor or a hard time, it's the bounce down. And then resilience is finding that bounce to get back up and not be stuck down anymore.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the geeky part of the neuroscience. So bear with Jane and I as we talk through the neuroscience. But I'm going to do a little Q&A, but no one has to answer this question if they don't want to. But what is a neuron? If you've been watching this in the past few sessions, we've talked about neurons a lot, so feel free to answer. If you were a neuroscience major on this call, you're not allowed to answer. So if anyone wants to unmute or throw it into the chat. One more second. That's okay. Okay, great. You know, I'm going to answer that. Good thing me and Jane got our degrees in neuroscience so we can answer the question of what is a neuron. So a neuron is one of the main cell groups in the brain. So the brain has two different main cell groups. They're called neurons and glia. And our brains have about 86 billion neurons in the brain that we get at birth and practically lasts us our whole entire lifetime, which is pretty remarkable. And these neurons have communicate with one another through these tiny gaps called synapses. And through these synapses, neurons, different brain cells, send different molecules to transmit information, and that is what allows your brain to do everything and anything.
Okay, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the neuroscience here. So bear with me, but I think this is pretty cool. So I thought I had to share it with you all. So an area of the brain called dendritic spines play a really important role in this ability to form these synapses or connections between the brain cells or neurons, like what Karina was talking about in the last slide. So what exactly are dendritic spines? So if you look closely, this is a picture of a neuron on the left. The dendritic spines are the little bumps on the side. Yes, exactly that. And then if you look at the red circle, you can see that dendritic spine starting to form another connection with a neighboring neuron. So dendritic spines have a really, really remarkable ability. They are able to respond to the environment and the stimulus that your brain is taking in, everything that's going on around you. And based off this, these dendritic spines are able to create, eliminate, and strengthen connections within your brain. And this is really, really cool. You are able to change the way that your neurons are connecting with one another, and this impacts your brain, behavior, your emotions, the way you act when something happens, really everything. So this ability to change and adapt based off the environment is remarkable, and we call it synaptic flexibility.
Yes, and I just want to go back to this last slide and just say how beautiful it is that Dr. Michael always says, like, if we ever learn something new today that you didn't know yesterday, that means your brain is changing. And with that, it's because of these teeny tiny little bumps on the neurons that are storing that new information that you just learned. And so, like, anything that we learn or anything that we experience, like, gets stored in these little microscopic ways. And this is really important because the more experiences, earlier I had shared that, like, the more experiences of something that you have strengthens these connections, strengthens these spines. And so, like, the more experiences of love you've had are strengthened in the brain. The more experiences of hurt are strengthened right here at this level. Cool. So yeah, so Jane talked about synaptic flexibility, and it's this way that our brain cells connect and form a diverse neural architecture to be able to have the capacity to respond to a variety of ways. So when we have very synaptically flexible brains, our brains have the scaffolding to experience different things and respond to it, and to be able to say, okay, this is a new stressor, but I have all of this flexibility going on that can then say, I can handle this, I can get through this. And so it's this stretchiness that lives in our brains that allows us to not get stuck, because we have such a diverse and enriched brain neural architecture that knows, okay, this might be new, but I can do this. And this is stored in all of these different connections. We have about 100 trillion synaptic connections in our brain. 100 trillion. And we have 86 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections. And it is in the working together of different connections, of the beautiful coordination of different connections, that allows resilience to arise within the brain. And so Jane said this earlier, but there's this myth that resilience comes from the absence of stress. A lot of us try to say, oh, I wish I can get rid of the stress in my life, or, oh, I don't want my kids to face any stress or whatnot. But really, the only way that we can build and practice our resilience is in the face of stress. And as we said earlier, stress is just part of being human, and it should not be something that we're afraid of or run away from. And so the truth is that resilience arises through this building of both individual and social capacity, and is practiced in the face of stress with healthy support. A lot of time we think that we just need to, Beltrana likes to say, jam on our own, and we can't do that. Resilience is not done just by ourselves. Sure, there can be individual practices of resilience, but it's really necessary to have that strong social support.
Okay, so these are 6 brain care tips. This actually comes from a suite of resources that we have created, all surrounding brain care. And these 6 tips are rooted deeply in neuroscience. They are: rest up, listen to your body, nourishing your brain, exercise your body and brain, find friends to foster resilience, and practice gratitude. And practicing these 6 tips is a wonderful way to individually build resilience. And if you're more interested in learning about these brain care tips, you can, this is a shameless plug for our next presentation. I think it's at 2:15, but it's solely focused on these brain care suite, and you can learn more about how you can take care of your brain in the way that your nervous system expects and build more resilience. So it's all connected. This is also from our Brain Care for Kids book, just like one of our previous slides. And this is how we shared with the kids how they could grow resilience, but we thought this would be great for all us adults as well. So I'm just going to read them out. Being kind to yourself and others, even when times are hard. Accepting we all have bad days sometimes. Feeling all your feelings that come. Resting when your body feels tired. Trying again, even after defeat. Turning to someone when you are feeling sad or down.
And so we're going to take just a few minutes for you guys to silently reflect. If you feel so called to share in the chat your answer to this question. But a lot of the times we don't take the time to pause and reflect on the ways that we have practiced resilience. If you've made it through this week, you've made it to today being Saturday, you had to have practiced some sort of resilience. And so we just wanted to create the space to be able to think, okay, and celebrate. Okay, I did something to get me to where I am right now. Me and Jane are both going to share our experience to give an example of what it means to be what it means to think through practicing resilience. But for me, last night, I was getting really, really excited about today, but I was working all day and I wanted to keep going over the presentations and whatnot. But I thought, no, okay, I need to take a second and celebrate all of this good work that we've done in preparation for today. And so one of my besties and I went to go get some ice cream, and it was just so good to spend some time with her, ask her how her week has been going, and connect with her, but also to take that ability to step away from the work that I had been doing.
Yes, mine is kind of similar, Karina.
Nice.
I think we were both a little excited and stressed about today. And we had a conversation last night. So it's funny that we both had the exact same experience afterwards. So I too was quite stressed and excited about today, and all the excitement that was going to come. So I also wanted to continue to review my slides late into the night, but I said, okay, no, I need to take a step back and, as Karina said, celebrate everything that we've done and take time to relax and decompress from the busy week that we had preparing for this. So I'm a big knitter. I have to make sure my dad isn't on this, but I'm knitting him a hat. He's not on this, so we're good. I'm knitting him a hat, so I worked on that last night. And my boyfriend, I spent time with him, and we just relaxed and took that time to decompress.
Amazing. So I'll give you guys a few more minutes. Some of the ones in the chat are having a dinner with friends, listening to favorite music, spending time with young people, despite having a hectic schedule, having dinner with friends and exercising, going for a long run and feeling the cool air. Amazing. These are all beautiful ways.
I just want to jump in and say that sometimes having to share how you're going to celebrate yourself is a way to remind yourself. So my team knows every Friday we're going to do some type of check-in on how they are celebrating making it through the week, no matter how the week was. So thank you for adding this exercise.
Yeah. Give you guys a little bit less than 30 more seconds just to think through this. Thank you for taking the time to answer this question. And thank you for the people who put it in the chat as well. Okay. And so we just want to finish off by saying, okay, how does resilience relate to self-healing communities? I think you might be able to make some of the connections, but resilience is really foundational to self-healing communities, because in order to build a healthy and flourishing community, we need to have resilient individuals. Any community is made up of its individuals, and in order for us, to have this collective healing community, we need to be resilient. And with this too, a main focus of the work of self-healing communities is making meaningful connections, building relationships. And from this presentation, we know that we need each other to practice resilience. For a really flexible brain, we need to have supportive relationships and surround ourselves with a really strong social network. There's this amazing doctor, his name is Bessel van der Kolk, and he says that social support is a biological necessity. It's not an option. We need each other to be healthy, to be resilient.
Okay, so I love this picture in these images, but going back to that trampoline analogy, resilience is really that ability to bounce back up and get back into that healthy homeostatic range of brain and body functioning. And as Karina said, having a supportive social network, having people that you can rely on really help to get you back into this range. It helps you to build this synaptic flexibility where you're not only bouncing back up, but you're bouncing back up even stronger than you were before. Okay, so as we mentioned before, really resilience is the foundation of self-healing communities. And that's why me and Karina were both so excited to give this presentation. The vision of self-healing communities is to increase protective factors throughout the region, especially 1 to 2 caring adults in every person's life. So really taking this back to resilience, the reason we want to increase the amount of caring adults in every person's life is we know how essential having individuals that you can rely on is to building resilience and being able to protect yourself from toxic stress, being able to bounce back, and being able to really develop a flourishing and healthy and strong brain.
So we don't stay outside of that range, that we're able to come back into this healthy range of homeostasis. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And we have about 10 minutes for questions. So thank you.
One question I wanted to ask you is the whole nervous system. You know, we talk about resilience, and you and I, all of the team, the 3 of us, we talk a lot about, we don't even recognize that the body is responding to all of the things. Dr. Michael talked earlier about the brain is a situated organ, talking about a baby, you know, and situated, yes, in our brain, but also in our environment. And so when you talk about resilience, how does that truth connect with what you just shared today?
Jane, do you want to, or do you want me to?
Why don't we bounce off of each other?
Yeah. So your question is about how resilience, how resilience plays a role in the reality, the fact that our brain is a situated organ. Well, resilience, like we said, is built through connection. And like Dr. Michael talked about earlier, is that the brain is not only situated in our heads, it's situated in its environment, and it's constantly being shaped and built and changing in response to our environment. And so much so that if I have only experienced neglect, or if I've only experienced hardship without a couple, and I've experienced no relationships, then my brain has no understanding of what resilience looks like, what it feels like, what love is. It does not have the capacity, because it has the capacity, but it doesn't have the experience to build those new neurons. And so the fact that we are situated within our environment is so important, because then it lends us to know that what we do matters, and how we treat other people matters. The tone of voice matters. The ways that we set up our spaces to be safe matters, because it affects this developing nervous system over a lifetime. So I hope that was my way of answering. Okay.
It made me think, and then Jane, it made me think about flourishing. You know, that slide that we have that you'll be showing in the other presentation, but thank you.
Jane.
Yeah, and just to add on that, you said that beautifully, but it also really emphasizes the importance of child development and giving children and adolescents, when this brain is really, really developing and forming all these connections for the first time, giving them a breadth of experiences, giving them loving touch, exposing them to a vast amount of sensory experiences. This even comes down to being in nature, seeing colors, and all of this helps to form the synaptic connections in their brain, so that as they grow up, they will have this synaptic diversity that allows them to practice resilience. So it's also a really important facet of resilience. And we also, another shameless plug, we are doing a presentation specifically on child development and adolescent development later today. So if you're interested in how that plays into resilience, you can check that out as well.
That's at 6:30. It's called The Joy of the Child and Teen Brain. So 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. I also want to point out that people said amazing slides. We're really intentional about, we know that this neuroscience can be really heavy. And so we also use neuroscience to help us, that when it's beautiful and we take our time with layering it, then it's easier for you to be able to see the beauty in it. So thank you for that compliment.
Any other questions? Yes. The question. Yeah. So the question in the chat is, so can resilience be connecting with new people? Yes. The answer is yes. New connections forms new networks in the brain, new connections with other people builds new connections in the brain. We have a presentation that we give, that we've given about how when we engage with other human beings that come from a different background, a diverse perspective, it helps us not only challenge implicit biases and implicit things in our own ways of perspecting, but it also grows empathy and compassion. And so that is helping build resilience in the brain. Like we said, resilience is the synaptic flexibility, this diversity of experiences, diversity of connections. And so connecting with new people 100% does well for the brain.
Mm-hmm. And it broadens that social support that can help you bounce back into that healthy range when you do face a stressor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. Awesome. I have one thing that I would love to add based off of Elshana's question earlier about how our brain is a situated organ. And I'm going to go back a bit to one of the slides if I can just. And something that I've learned from Dr. Michael is that the concept of that, the fires, the neurons, the thoughts that we have and the actions that we do strengthen these different neurons. So if we have a certain pathway of, or a certain way of thinking or a certain way of behaving, that every time we do that strengthens that. And so by building resilience, a big part too is like self-talk, or is the way that is the narrative that you give yourself and other people. And so I just feel called to share that in order to build a resilient brain, we have to be able to have the awareness of how we're speaking to each other, how we're speaking to ourselves, because that is our, like, the way we talk to ourselves is also our environment. The way that we talk to others is our environment. And so, and that gets stored and strengthened at this really small synaptic level. And so for me, there's a phrase that I always like to tell myself if it's a not a healthy way of thought, I go, don't strengthen that synapse, because every time I think it, that synapse is going to get strengthened over time. So just to have the awareness that what we put in, what we consume, what we listen to, how we speak really gets stored in the brain. Yeah. Thanks for letting me add that. We have 2 more minutes.
You can share what's coming up next.
Oh.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you. Oh,
you go, girl.
Oh, me? Okay. So thank you so much for listening. And we would love for you to join us later in the afternoon. We have sessions all afternoon, and we will resume at 1 p.m. with a panel led by Jan Marable, who is one of our program coordinators. We love Jan. She's the best. So please go listen to her talk. I know it's going to be awesome. And of course, this is a fundraiser. So please check out the Give Groove site and tell all your friends to join. And we are so appreciative of any support that we can get.
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop sharing.